welcome to episode
10.
of Jordan and Cook. Well, we think it's 10. We're not 100% sure, to tell you the truth.
We're making it 10 regardless.
Yeah. We're continuing to innovate in the way that we record these podcasts, and we've moved away from the mobile phone because it just wasn't reliable.
Yeah.
We're now recording directly onto a MacBook Pro through its iSight camera, and that means that I don't have to import it. I can just edit it straight in the MacBook Pro.
Well, that'll save you a lot of time,
It will
Jason.
save me a lot of time indeed. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us for this episode yet again. What things are we going to be talking about this week?
Well, I don't know. I was hoping it was your start, Jason. Is it yours?
Right, okay. Well, no, it's not. But
Okay, you start.
I'll start anyway. I was going to talk about employment, just because it's a topic at the moment.
It is a topic.
Yeah, a topic for you particularly, but a topic for me as well. It's I get bored easily.
Yeah.
And as a direct result of getting bored easily, I like to lay my hand to different things. But unfortunately,
Bored already of this, Jason.
the things that I like to lay my hand to are the things that I generally can't get a job doing.
Your wife, for instance. No one's going to pay you to get your hands on your wife, which is a shame. It'd be cool if they did.
It's true enough. But, I want to do a bit more radio work. I want to do a bit more TV work, but it's just not out there.
Clearly, running your own business and freelancing isn't enough for you.
No, it's not. Like I say, I get bored easily. What's the point in running a business and having to work in it?
Yeah, no, I understand.
You don't get a dog and bark as well.
I'm always surprised at people that do run their own business and have staff, but still go there anyway. It's like, isn't the whole idea of this that you don't have to go in there? But some people are different. I think some people live for that. They live to go in there every day and stomp around like,
I guess there was a period of time where I kind of even defined myself by what job I was doing.
Yeah.
And, I've kind of passed that stage now. Even with PC Guru, I would refer to myself as being the chief geek at PC Guru, which was a little bit of a marketing term, but it was also how I actually saw myself. And I'm kind of glad that I'm leaving that behind slowly but surely.
What made you? Did you have an epiphany that brought that in, or was
No,
it?
Not really. I think I just got bored of it. You can only do one thing for so long.
Yeah.
And PC Guru ended up being a 14-year project.
And you're right. People do. When people ask me, what do you do for a living? It's a question I hate to answer because I feel that what they automatically do is then define and we'll go, well, if you're that, then and also there's a whole lot of other superstitions that they'll put in on that. Well, that means you're also blah, 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 which I kind of dislike. And
the problem is, of course, that unless you've been doing something for a long time, regardless of your skill set, management are loath to pay people anything more than the minimum that they can get away with. So you look at like working in radio. You might want to lob into a job. For example, there was a gig going at a centre outside of Perth. I'm not going to name it, just in case.
I'm just wondering, is this microphone back to front? I think it is.
It shouldn't matter.
It does matter, though, because we've done this before.
Have we?
Because it's a cardioid mic, isn't
it? All right. Well, if he wants to turn the mic around, I'll let him turn the mic around.
I reckon it's going to sound better now, Jason.
No, he just put on his radio announcer voice.
It's going to sound better now.
Better.
Bigger.
Better.
More exciting.
Yeah, we can see what brand it is now as well, M Audio. Anyway, as I was saying, you want to lob into a job, and I reckon it doesn't really matter how good you are at it. Let's use radio as the example.
Yeah.
So an opportunity comes up at a radio station outside of Perth, and you're a gun, for example.
I'm a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the likelihood of you actually being able to get what I would call an appropriate salary out of doing that is minimal.
Yeah, is incredibly poor. But one of the big things with that is it's a creative pursuit, and sadly, that'll be the phone. Sadly, with your creative pursuit, what it means is it's very subjective as to whether you're actually any good or not. It's like, what is a good painter? What is a good artist? What is a good songwriter? What is a good radio announcer? What is a good, I don't know, street
would you not agree that a good radio person might well be reflected in their ratings?
Oh, absolutely.
So if I knew a particular guy who, say, was hosting a show that was the number one rating show in Perth on any particular night,
yeah,
you would imagine that guy would be paying would be paid a decent amount of money for that.
Yeah, but from the perspective of the employer, and if we look to somewhere that's in a regional area that wants to employ somebody for that particular position, they quite simply, they're run by a big company, they don't have the money there to pay for that person. And it makes no difference to them because they don't have ratings.
So it's, for those guys at least, it's not so much about the creativity, the skill, the delivery, it's about the dollars.
Yeah, well,
it's about business.
Yeah, and it's a bum on a seat. So they'll happily employ some, 22-year-old who wants to make a star, and he'll stay there for a while and he'll do his thing, and they'll go and sell advertising. The connection has never been made, certainly in regional radio more so, between having people who can perform, for the want of a better word, and the revenue you'll generate. The revenue has also always been a case of, well, we'll make more revenue if we have better salespeople and we drive them harder. And as long as there's noise coming out of the speakers, then we fulfilled that part of the deal. And as cheaply as possible, we want to get that noise coming out those speakers. There are varying amounts. Some networks will employ local announcers the whole way through the day. Grant broadcasters, I know, tend to do that pretty well. They don't network very much, whereas someone like Southern Cross Stereo, there are a plethora of radio stations in regional WA that will have a live breakfast show and nothing else, nothing else, and that's a great shame. And the company still is not making any money and is run like a very tight ship, and so. Yeah, they'll go, well, we're not making any money. How can we afford to pay people?
And, of course, radio is not unique in that regard either. Television is the same. It's mostly networked now right across the country.
Yeah.
And Perth's a perfect example. Channel 9's a perfect example. And they've really just backed off to only having their local news services. And that's a real shame. I mean, the studios at 9 always used to be really, really busy.
Yeah. Well, the Channel 7 building, I mean, they're getting a new building in Perth, but the Channel 7 building is a museum piece. People apparently swap offices in there every month because there are so many offices and so few people.
It's such a shame because I remember it would have been the early 80s, the late 70s if you want. Channel 7 was kind of like the local TV station.
Yeah, they're always really big on that. They had the same thing in Melbourne too.
You'd rock up at Channel 7 and they'd have the telephone golden brick wall up there. Yeah. And they'd always have fetes and carnivals up on that oval. Yeah. People would go in as audiences to shows. Telethon was hosted in Studio One. Yeah. It was just incredible.
But as things disseminate and as we get different forms of entertainment, all of which are equally as fabulous, if not more, than television, television and radio and mainstream media, newspapers, had one of two options. They could either invest and try and create something that will put them ahead of the game so that they continue to make that kind of money. That's a risk. There's no guarantee with that. Or they could just pull back and look at ways they could save money. And who runs companies? Especially through the 90s, there was a big change in media companies. The managers weren't the program makers, weren't the producers anymore. They became the accountants. They became the salespeople, the bean counters. Those are the people who got into those roles. And who owned the companies? They weren't owned by people who had an interest in the media anymore. They were owned by Macquarie Bank. They were owned by giant conglomerates who owned lots and lots of shares in lots and lots of different things. So all those things conspired through the 90s, and then the internet came in over the top of it. And as a result, what you have is a very limited scope for those who, I guess, are creative, certainly in the electronic mainstream media field. And you get paid sweet FA.
It's going to die a death, radio, apart from local stuff. Because now with the internet and the advent of people having the internet even while they're driving, it means you can stream anything from anywhere around the world. Now, we've got a great example of something local with Omni, which is a customised radio station, if you want, where you can pull in whatever content you want. And it just creates a continuous linear radio stream for you out of content that you've effectively chosen. Now, that's brilliant.
Yeah, they have the right setup. They're starting out in that tradition of the internet where it's a free-for-all. So people are signing contract agreements with them, but they're not limited to just that service, and they're not limited to and Omni aren't limited as into what they can take. So they'll take anything from anyone, as long as they're willing to supply it consistently over a period of time.
And by the way, they're not unique. I've since looked around as well, and there's things like Stitcher Radio, which does much the same thing. So, it's not unusual. But I guess what I'm saying is that these sorts of services are going to be what the youth of today are preferring to listen to, because why on earth would they want to listen to a whole bunch of ads?
As soon as we lose the cap on your downloads for your mobile devices, which will happen, whether it happens in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it literally is just around the corner. That will be the death of terrestrial broadcasting as we know it. Certainly with something, the last vestige of radio is that thing in the car. Podcasts are stepping into that, but podcasts aren't immediate.
I even look at the clock radio I've got next to my bed, and it's got internet radio embedded into it.
Yeah.
So I can choose virtually any radio station in the world, commercial, BBC, whatever you want. Plus, there's all the internet radio stations that are run just by people in their own back room.
Well, that's right. And cars are being manufactured now with Pandora or Spotify in them, and they don't include some of the times on those in your download limits. And that's fine, but with those services, they're still not quite radio. It's still not quite that thing.
Yeah, but I think when we talk radio, we're talking about local content. That's what makes it radio.
No, I don't think. No, I think there's essentially something else that makes radio radio, and I think there's a sense of immediacy. There's a sense of being connected with something instantaneous. So local is your point of view and is your life, and so therefore it's easy to understand, and so you're more attracted to that. But I don't think that is the quintessentially what radio is. I think that the immediacy is what makes radio. That anything could happen at any time. If a bomb went off, then your radio will come in and say, "Hey, a bomb's gone off." If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas, whether that be local or international, certainly, let's face it, if there was a huge event that happened in New York, similar to September 11, and you could now tune into a New York radio station. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's very cool.
You could actually tune into a New York radio station.
Even in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. While you're driving along, you can listen to the broadcast as it's happening in New York as you're driving to Butler to go and visit your gran.
So, apart from the fact that it's difficult at the moment, why would someone listen to a local radio station, a local music radio station, over, say, Today FM out of Sydney or BBC Two or something out of Los Angeles? Why would you listen to something local?
Well, you wouldn't generally. There are two things you can do, I think, to generate, and I think it needs to be a feedback loop. I've been a big believer in supporting local music. I think that the more local music you play, the more interest you generate in local music, the more people that might go out and see local bands, the more popular that becomes, the more people that go out and see local bands and then know that they can hear that great band they heard on the weekend on the radio, then tune into your radio station. So I think if a radio station can really harness that energy and that ability, there's something in that from a music perspective. And you could still obviously include stuff nationally. And
I was just going to say, but from what I can see, though, most of our local music radio stations don't really play local music.
Well, they have. What you do is you have a local music show. You will play some local music, but you won't feature it.
The only West Australian song I keep hearing is "Suburban Boy."
That's right. The expression "with closed eyes." Where's that gone? That was a local song. The other side too is to have people on the radio, your hosts, having an in-depth kind of common man understanding of what it is to live in the city. So to be out and about, to know what it's like to drive through the roadworks on the Mitchell Freeway, to know what it's like when you've had a storm come through one night, to know what it's like when you're trying to take your kid to the emergency department in the hospital, and to be able to really touch those things.
Yeah, but the most popular shows that we hear in Australia are those that are networked, that don't have any local content. I mean, you have a look at the likes of Hamish and Andy. Okay, they're funny, but they don't do anything that's local.
They didn't put them on breakfast either.
No.
A great national show, it still has its worth, and it's still a great thing. Internationally, a great international show is still a great thing, regardless.
Howard Stern.
But, we're not talking about that. That's right. What we're talking about is how local radio can survive and do the best that it can. Now, you could have a completely national network with a completely beige programming across the entire thing.
I think they call that Smooth FM.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Clear Channel. And you can do that, and you'll rate okay. You'll do all right. But you won't maximise your returns, and you won't be looking after yourself, I think, in the long term, because I think sooner or later you're going to have another 600 people doing exactly the same
that's
thing.
right. Yeah.
And Smooth, I think we're seeing something that will, in the short term, will do okay, because there's an audience. I think they've split.
And because they're using celebrities.
That's right, and they've split a bit off. The older the Today Network females that are growing up, and the mixed females that are getting a bit older. They've kind of taken a bit from that. So I think it's been a really good wedge, and it's really pulled its own audience much better than Vega or Vega ever did.
Here's a very interesting thing that's happened over the last few months, but really it's starting to come into prominence now. Kyle and Jackie O have always done really well for Today FM.
Yeah.
They've pulled the pin.
Yeah.
They're going. Where are they going? Well, there used to be a station in Sydney called Mix.
Still called Mix.
106.5.
It's it's vaguely 106.5,
and it's about to change its name to Kiss FM.
Although they haven't confirmed that.
And what I'm reading is that we've got a national show here that is actually forming a radio station. That's effectively what's happening.
Well, obviously, the Mix brand in Sydney isn't really working. The Mix brand in Adelaide, gangbusters. The Mix brand in Perth, which is slightly different because it's Austereo and not ARN, incredibly well. The Mix brand in Melbourne is doing pretty well. The old double TFM. But in Sydney, it's not working that well. It's really suffered, and it's suffered at the hands of Smooth, and it's suffered at the hands of, well, no one really quite knows. I think what they saw in Jackie and Kyle was an opportunity to bring in a known product
with an audience.
And that's right, they'll bring in an audience with that, although they already have an audience on Mix, so they have to be conscious of that. And hopefully they can, by combining the two, by putting the Mix audience there that's not going to scatter, because I guess they're going to presume a lot of that's already gone, and bringing in some of that Today FM audience who really like Jackie and Kyle, and making it Kiss a bit edgier, then they might be able to pull a substantial share and, perhaps even get number one.
I just don't know, because I look at Kyle these days, and okay, he used to be, even though he's always been obnoxious, but kind of cool, with the kids, knows all the stuff. He's 42 years old, 130 kilos, and has grey hair like yours. I don't think that he is the right person to actually be hosting a show for the under 25s anymore.
Well, I would say that Kiss is aimed at a slightly older audience. I think you'll find that it'll be a little bit more conservative. They have to be careful, though, because they have their specific audience for a reason. But I think they'll be looking at changing that, and I think part of that move from one to the next is a chance for Kyle and Jackie O to reinvigorate what they do and kind of reimagine how they go about things, and a chance for the Mix brand in Sydney through ARN to reinvigorate what they are and to make a new thing that's perhaps not seen as quite so disposable as the Today Network stuff, but not quite as blue rinse set as Mix or WSFM.
We've done 20 minutes of talking about radio, and I'm just
Well,
wondering
there-
if maybe what we need to do is change the podcast entirely from Jordan and Cook to let's talk about radio.
Yeah, well, it certainly narrows it down. Mind you, the amount of people watching, it doesn't really matter.
No, not really.
We do whatever we like.
That's exactly right. Hi, Mum, by the way. Your turn.
Your mum watches. That's
No, I
impressive.
have no idea.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to touch on a thing. How many psychopaths do you think you've known in your life?
Apart from me,
Apart from you?
right. Probably 3.
3.
Mm.
How were they to deal with?
Very charismatic and sociable.
Yeah, didn't have any problem with them?
A problem with one of them, but only later. When I first knew them and I was first associating with them, lovely people.
But
But
they are when you first...
Later, when they turn,
Yeah, he becomes a bit of a nightmare.
she, in this
She
instance.
becomes a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah. And, I never even had a relationship with this girl, so it's not like a woman spurned.
Yeah.
It was just more once there was no need for us to associate any longer, she took advantage of that situation to actually start sledging me in public. And what can you do?
Yeah. Interesting. I've probably had contact with a couple, I guess, that have played any sort of role. I mean, you're going to bump into them frequently, but you don't even know. And I've always found it an interesting mental condition, given the functionality. Intelligent people, very able, very functional, but also at the same time, just that complete inability to comprehend in any way, shape, or form anything that's not their idea can have any worth. And
Is that not a sociopath as compared to a psychopath?
well, what are the lines between those?
Well, a psychopath generally is more willing to resort to extremes to get what they want, whereas a sociopath is more someone who will manipulate existing conditions to bring them what they want.
Yeah,
On the number line, sociopath sort of sits between 6 and 8.
Yeah.
Psychopath is 8 to 10 or 11.
One's more of an extreme than the other. So let's use a blanket term: antisocial personality disorder.
That's right. Okay.
If that's better, rather than a 7 psychopath and a 6 sociopath. And the other thing is because they have this incredible self-doubt at their very core, and inside, it's all bravado and it's all shield. It actually makes them, after a while, really difficult to navigate with. Even if you want to try and you're aware of what it is and you're aware and you're trying to work with it, it's incredibly difficult because anything you do can be seen potentially as a threat unless it's completely submissive. And that's really difficult. And I wonder whether we need to put more tests on people so we can spot them from an earlier age and maybe have something we can do just to get the pain in the asses out of the way.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to have a lot of joy doing that. I think it is difficult to identify them, but once you have, you just exclude them altogether.
Well, I think that's one of the things that the trouble is, and when you read anything, it's like, well, unless they've had an actual test and an official test, you can't go saying, oh, they're this or they're that.
They're normally pretty clever as well in that if a test comes along, they can fudge that.
Well, that's exactly right. And there's been studies done which shows that if you take them to a psychologist to try and talk about their problem and to ask them, why do you behave in a certain way when a normal person would behave in another way, they go, oh, that's what a normal person, and they come back, reinvigorated because they've learned, all this stuff they didn't understand.
Yeah, they've learned more about how to manipulate people.
Absolutely, you've just trained them up a little bit. But I do wonder. There just seems to be a lot of them in those pivotal positions. We do.
They end up being CEOs. Very much so.
Really reward it, and I think to some idea, it gets back to your position we were speaking about earlier, where you can be the most qualified. You can have the stats and the stuff to back up a position. You can be completely approachable, but you're not going to get an opportunity because or you're not going to get along easily. That'd be the phone
Hello?
again.
Hello?
Um,
Hello?
It'll be Auntie
Oh, it's
Val.
old technology. It doesn't... Yeah, okay.
It's got an answering machine.
Right.
It'll ring for a while. But yeah, so what'll happen is that I forgot what I was going to now. I'm completely distracted.
Qualified people.
Qualified people. So therefore they will put people in positions around them that are subservient to them, and to the detriment, I guess, of whatever business it is they're running, because they're not actually employing the best people; they're employing the people to do their bidding.
Alan Bond once said, "Always employ people who are smarter than you."
Oh, and I 100% agree. You want to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. You know,
not so smart they're going to take your business off you.
No, not so smart that they're plotting to kill you. But people who are smarter than you, but genuinely also have a conscience.
Yeah,
I think that's the tip to doing it properly.
Yes, and now that you talk about it like that, I can actually think of even more people who I would probably classify as being low-level psychopaths.
Yeah, there's a lot out there, and a lot of them work very well. Now
that I think about it, are they psychopaths or are they wusses?
I tend to think that they can be one and the same. I personally think that there is such a lack of, because they know that there's something wrong with them, because they can't feel things. Well, you can't feel it because you've just said you're a psychopath. They can't feel what and the way normal people feel. So they are aware that they're missing out on something that a majority of people intrinsically class as part of the human experience. And that makes you a bit bitter. And it also makes you a bit paranoid.
But I'm also looking at, and I'm thinking of particular individuals now, but I'm not going to go anywhere near describing who they are.
I wouldn't do that either, Jason.
But, there's certain people I know of who are in reasonably senior positions who have an inability to make intelligent decisions. They make decisions that allow them to continue down the same old path.
I mean, there are two sides. There are the sides of security, and there are there's the point of not getting...
Because they can manipulate down, but they can't manipulate up.
Absolutely. So you need to... So a lot of people will want to put an environment around them that helps them feel secure in what they're doing, which I guess to some degree is part of human nature. Depending on how... You mentioned you get bored very quickly, and you're a bit of a risk taker. And I'm the same. I'll do that. But the fact is, the reason I take risks and the reason I get bored quickly is also the reason that I'm not the CEO of a company. It's also the reason, I haven't reached a particular level of what is classed as, upper middle class society, because every time I've got into something that's bored the shit out of me and I felt I've really done all I can do here, instead of just sticking it out, I've gone, no, fuck this, I'm going to go and do something else.
Then again, you only live once. And so I think the right thing to do is not to get yourself in a position and build an empire. That's not the right thing to do. That's boring. Life is so short that I think you need to have adventure after adventure after adventure. And unfortunately, the problem with that is that you've pretty much got to start from scratch each time.
Absolutely. And one of the downsides of that is if you're a real genius, you could probably do that. And there are, examples of people who can do that again and again and again and be incredibly successful again and again and again, because they're, really smart and quite a genius. Whereas, sadly, if you're bright enough to know you're not genius, but bright enough to know you're reasonably bright, then it's a little bit trickier, sadly, and so your ability to navigate and problem solve is somewhat inhibited by your intelligence. So therefore, you can embrace those things and learn those things, and I truly think it makes you a better person.
It does, absolutely. A wealth of experience makes you a better person. The unfortunate thing is, and we're both prime examples of this, once you've got dependence, the world changes.
The game changes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And when I say dependence, I'm not just talking about kids and a wife. I'm also talking about a mortgage and car loans.
And you've got other people too. I mean, you've got employees and stuff like that who rely on you as well. So you've got an extra level of responsibility over and above what I have. So that does come into play. And then there's I don't know about you, but my parents were incredibly flippant, and for the want of a better word, irresponsible growing up. So I have this niggling thing at the back of my head the whole time that, you're just like your parents. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree now, does it? So, it's an extra thing that you have to deal with. But
it makes me realise I did end up being a little bit like my parents as well, although they're essentially hippies. Dad hasn't worked a full-time job now in 20 years, and Mum's never really had a full-time job. She did work briefly at Curtin, but what they've been doing over the last few years is basic entrepreneurialism. They've been doing things like buying a house, doing it up, flogging it off, then buying a house on a property, knocking it down, building 3 units on there, and selling them off.
Yeah.
And each time they do these sorts of things, Dad just gave a good example of a house he built recently. It took him a year to get it constructed. He did a lot of the work himself, but not the hard stuff, just the labour stuff. He's effectively made $200,000 tax-free.
Yeah.
Because you don't pay capital gains tax on your principal place of residence.
Okay.
So, you look at the fact he hasn't had a job, but in effect, he's made $300,000 if you taxed it.
That has been his job. Yeah. Yeah. And there you go. And you're probably very lucky to have parents like that with that sort of spirit about them. Whereas, I guess from my parents' perspective, the fact I can continue to keep food on the table of my children means I'm doing one better at this stage. So,
yes.
But yeah, I certainly think it's essential that you repeatedly challenge yourself. And as I get older too, I think it's essential too that you are prepared to take one step back, to take 2 steps forward.
Absolutely.
There was a time where I wouldn't know, I'm not doing that, I've been there, or, I think there comes a time you go, no, well, if I think about this, I'm clever about this. It's only really my stubbornness. If I strategically plan this may be an opportunity, and, I can't dismiss it purely because I see it as something that's, beneath what I think I'm worth doing. But who knows?
We're interested in your thoughts as well. By all means, leave a comment on the blog.
Yeah.
Wherever else. YouTube, you could leave a comment there as well if you wanted
just
to.
Anything.
Anything. Just say hello.
Hi, Mum.
Yes. And while I've got your attention, check out radiorevolution.fm.
It's exciting. Certainly is an interesting mix of music, Jason.
And sweepers and whatnot that I've just found from everywhere around the internet. But that will be fixed. Our good friend here, Paul Cook, is planning on redoing the sweepers and perhaps fixing up the playlist just a little bit.
And putting some other stuff in it.
Yeah, that'd be good value. Did you hear my weather reports?
I did hear weather reports. Robo weather.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. No, it was quite clever.
Updates every half an hour. Anyway, yes, thank you once again for watching. We will be back again next week-ish with another video podcast.
Sayonara.
Bye. Yeah!